We are doing Judaism and the supernatural, and I'm going to take you on a tour. We are going to go through the Talmud. We are going to go through the Medrash. We are going to go through primary sources all the way back in Tanakh and in the Torah itself. And I told you, and as I see it's too loud. What can we do? Can we lower it? Trust me. You want it lower. What can we do to lower the mic?
Keep going, Rabbi.
No way. I'll just stand further back. That's what we're going to do to lower the mic.
Who's complaining?
I see hands, I see ears. From up here you see all. We're going to go through primary sources. The Torah, the Talmud, the Medrash. And we are going to find the most wild supernatural creatures in there and hopefully have some sort of lessons to take home from it all. And we are supposed to do that in less than an hour. So wish us luck. The good news is, as those of you who were here yesterday know, at this speed you can get a lot done in an hour. I prepared about 2 hours of material, and my mouth will be moving at that speed. Are we ready? Yeah. Off we go to the supernatural. I would like to begin with something that is not very supernatural. These are aliens. You can't really see them on the slides very well, but I have Baby Yoda down there, and I have E.T. in the corner. I use this to figure out the average age of the people listening to my lectures. If that's your alien, you're on the older side. If that's your alien, you are on the younger side. I don't think my generation has an alien. The aliens of my generation failed us. I'm starting with aliens, and I'll show you why in just a moment. Even though they are not necessarily what I would think of when I think of a supernatural creature, there's a method to the madness. In 1969, and I guess if you remember that also puts you in an age category, perhaps in the ET section. In 1969, we landed on the moon. I must say there are audiences I speak to for whom that is a controversial statement. I've been there. Something that I like to say is that the reason why I'm 100% sure we landed on the moon and I'm not 100% sure of much is because, as you probably know, especially if you were here at yesterday's lecture, I'm a real big fan of the Rebbe. And I feel very strongly that the Rebbe doesn't necessarily, generally, ever get things wrong, and he talks about the moon landing, and you can't fool him. So, regardless of what you think of the moon landing, as far as I'm concerned, it happened because the Rebbe talks about it. Let's take a look at the moon landing. We have a moon landing in 1969. As far as I understand it, the landing happened on a Sunday. That means on Saturday, there was an orbiter that was going around the moon, and ultimately 2 people would be going out of the orbiter and landing on the moon, and one poor guy would get stuck circling the block waiting for them to come back. He is, of course, the least famous astronaut in history, and then there's person 1 and person 2 who make a small step for man and a giant leap for mankind. You've heard this one before. The Shabbos before the moon landing, the Rebbe gave a talk. And he gave a talk about the moon landing. And in his talk about the moon landing, he asked the following question. He said, they're about to land on the moon. People are excited about landing on the moon. We've never been to any other place before outside this planet. We hadn't been to the moon, hadn't been to Mars, hadn't been off the planet before in a meaningful way. We'd been in orbit. We hadn't landed anywhere. People are wondering, are we going to find life on the moon? People wondered that. They really did. It was what everybody was talking about in 1969, and the Rebbe talks about it too. Will we find life on other planets? And the Rebbe looks around the room, and he asks, can anybody here tell me where in the Talmud and where in the Torah we talk about aliens? And the room falls silent. And I don't know. I think the room probably fell silent because you don't interrupt the Rebbe when he gives a rhetorical question in a giant audience. But then the Rebbe asked a second time and said, really? Nobody? And at that point, if you know, you answer. And they did not answer. They didn't know. He'd stumped the crowd. So the Rebbe said, and the Rebbe said this. In Shoftim, in Judges, chapter 5, we meet Devorah. Devorah is a fun character. Devorah is a woman. She is also a warrior. She is also the chief rabbi of her generation. These are the problems I make that Rabbi Brisky has to clean up later. But the fact is, we have the leading rabbinic light of her generation, the leading scholar of her generation, the leading prophetess of her generation, and by all means, the leading warrior of her generation, at least in that she went to war. And I don't think she fought. I think she kind of stood there and watched. But she was in battle. She's an incredible character, Devorah. You've heard of Devorah. Yeah. After she wins, she sings a song. And in her song, if you actually read her song does not read like a song of praise to God necessarily. It's half song of praise and half diss track. You know what a diss track is? Yeah, that's exactly what it is. If you know what a diss track is, that's how Devorah reads. That is, she goes, God is great, God is the best, we won the war because of God. And there were some people who didn't join the war, and may they burn. And then she goes, God is the greatest, he's the biggest, he won the battle. And I called some people to join us in the battle, and they didn't want to participate. May they be cursed forever. And what she does is, she celebrates God, and she absolutely trashes the people who didn't help her win this war. Along the way, while she is trashing the people she doesn't like, I guess in the second half of Devorah's song, she makes the following statement. Curse you, Meroz, said the messenger of the Lord. Curse you bitterly, you inhabitants thereof, because you came not to the aid of the Lord against the mighty. Uru Meroz, uru kol yoshvea. Cursed is Meroz, cursed is everybody who lives on Meroz. And the Talmud in Moed Katan on 16a has a very simple question. Who's Meroz? We know other people in the Bible. We've met them. We know where Ammon and Moab are. We know where Assyria is. We know where the characters in the countries were. We talk about them a lot. Meroz is mentioned exactly once, and she's furious at them. It says here that Barak excommunicated them with 400 shofar blasts. I don't know if that's a lot or a little for an excommunication, but it's more than I usually do. So that's a lot of excommunication. They were very mad. And the Talmud says two opinions. Opinion number one, some say Meroz was a guy. It was a person. We don't know the name of every person. He was a warlord. In that part of the world, they still have warlords who sort of function like de facto governors of entire areas. He had a whole army he could have brought. He didn't bring him. He's in trouble. That's one opinion in the Gemara. Some say he was a warlord, a strong man. But then the Gemara says, if you want, I would like to propose another possibility. And the Talmud tells us two equal possibilities as far as the Talmud is concerned. Could be Meroz was a guy. Could be Meroz was a planet. Curse you, Meroz, said the messenger of the Lord. Curse you bitterly, everyone who lives there. What did the Talmud just say? The Talmud you know what the Talmud didn't say? The Talmud did not say aliens exist. The Talmud said, I'm going to give you two scenarios that are equally plausible, logically speaking. Could be Devorah's mad that a local guy didn't fight the war. Could be Devorah's mad that there wasn't an intergalactic battle, and either sounds reasonable to us. That's what the Talmud's saying. The Talmud isn't taking a side. The Talmud is making it very clear that if you told them that there were aliens from another galaxy flying in on flying saucers, presumably, because how else do you get there, and shooting lasers from the sky to participate in a war, that wouldn't surprise us. It's not the Talmud saying there are aliens. It's the Talmud saying we wouldn't be surprised to hear of aliens. And as a matter of fact, one oral tradition we've had for a very long time is that Devorah enlisted aliens. As a matter of fact, look at the verse above that I skipped. From the heaven they fought. The stars from their courses fought against Sisera. Gives new meaning to that verse, doesn't it? Sounds like, the Rebbe continues in his talk, sounds like other aliens might have shown up and they didn't. We have an entirely different story now. Now, this is wild. How many of you are comfortable with the idea of aliens? Not just aliens, some life on other planets, but aliens capable of traveling to our planet and engaging in war on behalf of the Jewish people. I'll tell you this. It's possible we haven't heard from them anymore because the last time they were invited, they got cursed out of a. I think maybe they haven't shown up because they're still scared of Devorah. Like, why haven't we made contact? Look how we talk to them. They're super cursed. Aliens aren't allowed to come. They got shofar blasted. I don't know. Why am I telling you this? It's barely supernatural. I'm telling you for this reason. There's another alien. There's good old Jar Jar. Unfortunately, that's my generation's alien. Oof. I know, the worst one, like I told you. The Rebbe continues, though, and he says, the Rebbe has a moment of self-reflection in this talk, and that's going to launch our discussion tonight. The Rebbe, in a moment of self-reflection, says, why are we talking about aliens? So yeah, there's a moon landing coming up, fine. People are excited about it. We're Jews, we care about Torah and mitzvahs. A rabbi comes to your community, flies all the way over here and attempts, probably poorly, to make a red-eye back the following night. He'd better have something more to say than, have you thought of aliens? I mean, it's a ridiculous topic, it's a stupid topic, it's beneath the dignity of the intelligence of the people in the room. I'm paraphrasing the Rebbe, but that's what he says. Why are we talking about this stuff? The literal quote's on the screen, but I'm talking around it. The Rebbe answers, we're talking about this because people are into it. And if you meet some Jew on the street and tell them, would you like to be invested a little bit more in Torah and mitzvahs? Would you like to light Shabbos candles? Would you like to put on tefillin? Would you like to have more to do with Judaism? They might say back, I got nothing to do with Judaism. Judaism is not one of my interests, and Judaism doesn't seem that interested in me. Upon which you ask them, what are you into? And right now, they're into aliens. And therefore you tell them, did you know there are aliens in the tractate Moed Katan in the Talmud, and that Devorah appears to have talked to them? Do you know that the Torah has a whole alien section? And they go, wait, there's something for me in here? And that's their door. And they walk in through that door, and what do they find on the other end of that door? A Torah that is 100% for them. The Torah is for every Jew, but not every Jew merits to know what door will bring them into the Torah that is theirs and their inheritance from the beginning. It is our job as fellow Jews, as friends, as relatives, as people who care about other people, to provide more doors for people to enter through. And if someone enters through the alien door, you'd better know where to find the aliens. When I learned this talk from the Rebbe, this, first of all, captured my imagination, but second of all, it led me down quite a rabbit hole because I decided to extend the Rebbe's theory. The Rebbe's theory is that if you can show somebody aliens who likes aliens, that's their door into the Torah. So I said back, why not everything else? Because everything's in there somewhere, right? So why not all the supernatural? So based on that, I started teaching at our local high school and also at our local middle school once a week, pulling out some wild thing that the students were interested in. I would have them send in a list of all the stuff they thought wasn't in the Torah that they wanted to find out more about. And every week I did a full section, a full hour or two on that, where it is in the Torah. And a lot of it turned out to be supernatural, and that gave birth to the lecture you're having tonight. So partially in that spirit, let's see what we have. That's not supernatural at all. That's a very similar slide from the discussion we had yesterday. I need to show it to you briefly before we dive into the actual creatures for this reason. When you want to look for something supernatural, where do you look? Well, I guess the 5 books of Moses is a good place to start. But between me and you, you're not going to find much in there. Not that you're not going to find much in there. I mean, there's so much in there. It's the Torah. But if you want your wildest creatures, most of them don't show up in the 5 books of Moses. You have a sea monster near the beginning, and you've got fiery serpents somewhere near the middle to end. You've got stuff. But if you really want the best and the craziest creatures, you're going to need the Talmud. And for that, I just want to tell you a little bit about what the Talmud is. The Talmud is the Word of God, but it's funneled through the intellect of man. And that is that people reconstructed the oral tradition from Sinai by explaining laws to each other, extrapolating upon laws with each other, giving examples, and based on those examples, telling each other stories. And through these examples and stories, brought forth the will of God. We received the Torah at Mount Sinai in 1313 BCE. When we received the Torah at Mount Sinai, we received a written Torah, and along with that, oral instructions on how to interpret the Torah, how to guide our lives, how to literally use this book. We discussed yesterday, the Torah tells you to put on tefillin and conveniently leaves out what tefillin are. We needed some help. So the oral law was given to us at Sinai. We passed it down from generation to generation, and we have an unbroken chain of 3,338 years. I know it's an unbroken chain because I can tell you the name of somebody who passed down that tradition every single year of those 3,338 years. We have no blank spots. We don't have any major deviations. We know the name of the rabbi who led the generation and passed it on to the next generational leader for 3,338 years with no exceptions. And by the way, there is no culture in the world that can make that claim. There are cultures about as old as ours, but they all have gaps, they all are missing names, and most of them developed into something completely different from how they started. We have Moses' tradition passed down by name 3,338 years. That's the Talmud. That's the oral law. That's the Torah as it's studied when you're not studying the 5 books of Moses. I have a list here of how it went. I have some years there to make it interesting. I'm not going to go through them. I want to get to the wild animals and stuff, but I want to tell you this. While the rabbis were compiling the law, they were telling stories. And the reason why they were telling stories is because you can't compile law without telling stories. For example, when the rabbis are trying to discuss what God wants regarding meat and dairy, they frequently use their favorite dairy snack in the discussion. They love this thing called kutach, which is apparently disgusting. I mean, it involves moldy bread. It was all the rage. They loved this food, kutach. And the Talmud constantly talks about the kosher laws surrounding kutach. Can you mix kutach with this and kutach with that? Kutach sounds gross. But I will tell you this. In order for them to teach kashrus laws, they cited kutach, and therefore we know at least one ancient Babylonian dish they used to eat. It's not them popping into the story, hey, by the way, I'm teaching law. Would you like to know what I had for breakfast? It's a necessity. We're going to see a case in just a moment where in order to figure out how to rule on a case of vows, they had to cite a story where they met a dragon. So the stuff comes up, but it comes up in the strangest ways. There aren't sections of the Talmud dedicated to legend and sections dedicated to law. It's this long extended fabrengen where you say the law, apply the law, extrapolate the law, and along the way mention your culture, your language, your people, your legends, your stories, your animals, the things you've seen and the things you've read, the witches you've encountered and fought and defeated, and the demons that are haunting you in actuality and also metaphorically. That's the Talmud. And if you hold a book of Talmud in your hand, you have in your hand 3,338 years of every generation adding a new layer to it. It reads in a layered form. You have the primary text near the top. You have the next generation below, the next generation below on the sides. You have people who lived in the medieval times over there. In the back of the book, you have people who lived more recently. And every single Jewish generation has added a page to the Talmud. Not new law, God forbid, but the same ideas applied to novel scenarios, and anybody who decides that they want to study what's been done up until now and write the next chapter, you're authorized to do so. That's our inheritance, that's our birthright, that's the Talmud. And in there, you have monsters. There be monsters! Let me show you a couple. He's adorable. Some of the monsters that we have in the Talmud accomplish, as far as I can tell, exactly one goal, and that is Bechol Derechea Da'ehu. We are commanded by God to know Him in all of our ways. That is, everything we do, we've got to find God in it. We are not allowed, we get no time off. Jews don't get any time off. If I'm doing something, I got to find the God in it. The reason why God made the physical universe was because He wanted a dwelling place in this world. He wants us to know Him in all of our ways. If somebody is interested in dragons, they'd better know where the dragons are in the Talmud. For a lot of people, it's a door they walk through. I want to show you a couple cases where the simple reason why these things appear in the Talmud is because you'd better know them. They're interesting. They're part of the world. And guess what? The Torah is eternal. It's the blueprint for the universe. Of course, it includes a little bit of everything. So it's also there to strengthen your faith in the eternity of God Almighty. Some general broad goals, but frankly, dragons. Now, this should be interesting to you. How many synagogues have you walked into before and seen a dragon on the Aron Kodesh? How many tallis bags have dragons on the embroidery? Very few. You know what? That is ahistorical. If you were to walk into a synagogue about 1,000 years ago anywhere in the world, dragons were a major theme. We know this because we still have a lot of them. These are illuminated manuscripts from a pretty long time ago. One of these is a 13th century Haggadah from Italy. Another one is from 1490. That's a good deal of time later. But all over them, what they did to these manuscripts is they doodled on the manuscripts. They're doodling dragons. It seemed we used to use dragons frequently as motifs, the same way we use lions nowadays as a motif. If you would like a dragon on your tallis bag, I honestly think it would be more accurate historically than a lot of other things people put on their tallis bags. Rabbi Brisky, perhaps the next Aron Kodesh for the shul will have a big... No, he's not interested. He's not buying what I'm selling. But you know, it depends on the donor is, right? So I'm saying, if you happen to be a donor interested in parechas, and say, no, never mind.
We'll set up a meeting.
We'll set up a meeting. We'll talk about it.
Price for everything.
We have a verse in Isaiah. The verse in Isaiah talks about nations of the world and gives them characters that are like them. The verse goes, the burden of the beasts of the southland, in a land of trouble and anguish, the awesome lion and the crushing lion among them, the viper and the saraf me'ofef. No clue what that is. They carry their wealth on the shoulders of young donkeys and their treasures on the humps of camels to a people that will not avail. Now, I don't know what a saraf me'ofef is, but the good news is Rashi does. Rashi is very kind that way, and Rashi pops in with a commentary to tell me what Isaiah is talking about, because he knows that's not an animal people know the names of. We have lions, we have crushing lions, which apparently awesome and crushing lions are different kinds of lions. We have vipers, kind of snake, I guess. We have camels, we have donkeys, and we have a saraf me'ofef. I'm going to read the Rashi to you and translate literally. Saraf me'ofef. Min nachash hu. It's a kind of snake. So Rashi says, it is a kind of snake. It has wings, but its wings are not for flying. They are for jumping. It hops with its wings. It digs them in the ground and pushes off the ground and can glide very far, but does not fly. So it is a snake with wings that it glides with. And finally, Zayrek Lahav Mipiv. It shoots fire out of its mouth. I have a flying snake, a winged snake that shoots fire out of his mouth. What'd I just find? That would be a dragon. Now, it's a weird-looking dragon. You know why it's a weird-looking dragon? I will tell you why it's a weird-looking dragon. Back then, that's what dragons used to look like. Hang on, I have notes somewhere. I don't know. But it's okay. We'll do from memory. My notes disappeared. It's fine. But in England, dragons had 4 feet and they had wings. Those are the dragons you're used to. In China, they have a bunch of feet and no wings at all. That's what they're used to over there. Every region had its dragon. In the ancient Near East, every dragon was called, I cannot pronounce this word, Amphitter, Impetir, Ampetir, I don't know what it is, but it's all over the ancient Near East. They are winged snakes that breathe fire. This is what the Saraf Me'ofef is. It is the dragon of the ancient Near East. Mentioned specifically. Now, does this line mean those existed? It doesn't. These are being used as metaphors. But Isaiah is speaking the language of the people. A prophecy is supposed to be clothed in what people are talking about. Isaiah wants to conjure fearsome beasts. So Isaiah says, there's lions, fearsome, vipers, fearsome, and dragons, cited in our holy Tanakh. And later on in Tractate Nedarim, many, many years later in the Talmud in Tractate Nedarim, a discussion goes on. And in this discussion, somebody makes the following statement as a vow. People used to make weird vows. If you've ever studied the section on vows, you know vows are interesting. One of the vows that somebody would have made in theory one time goes as follows. I hereby vow to never drink wine again if I didn't see a snake as big as an olive press. And the Talmud goes, that's a silly vow to make. Who says things that way? And second of all, it's automatically a false vow. It's automatically an invalid vow because they don't make snakes that big. And that should have been the end of the discussion. But then the Talmud pipes in and goes, you sure about that? Because we heard about a snake that big once. Apparently King Shapur had a snake that was so big that it was able to swallow 13 bundles of straw and only then was satisfied. It was able to swallow that much food. The Yerushalmi tells a slightly different story where they do this in order to make sure that it doesn't eat anybody else. They sort of sate its hunger on bundles of straw. We have a giant serpent dragony thing. So yeah, we got dragons. We got dragons. Here be dragons. If you give me just 1 second, I'm annoyed that my notes aren't coming up, so I'm going to give it a second to actually load because I do want to be able to give you better sources. There they are. All right. Yeah. I know we're doing fine without notes, but if I can give you where things are and tell you words and things, it's always better, right? All right. There we go. I got my dragons back. We also have witches. And once again, this seems to me to be because everything in the entire world is contained in the Torah somewhere. There's nothing that people are generally interested in that doesn't show up in the Talmud. The Talmud and the Torah are eternal and contain everything, so of course, there's going to be witches. People have been talking about witches for ages. There's apparently a couple witches and wizards that ended up being a major movie franchise as well as like the best-selling book in history. People like this stuff. There's no way in the world that something could enter the world without the blueprint for the universe, our Holy Torah, talking about it first. And oh yeah, we've got witches. I have so much to tell you about witches. Witches are everywhere in the Torah. There was a lengthy debate, as a matter of fact, between Rambam and Ramban, whether witches were literally able to do magic or whether they were just conjurers who were able to fool you really well. That's not for here right now. What we have right now is a section of the Talmud, Tractate Sanhedrin 67b. And in Tractate Sanhedrin 67b, the Talmud has a discussion, an argument. And the argument is, can a witch override the will of heaven? Now you would probably guess not. You're a Jew. You know heaven's in charge. God gets to rule the world. Obviously, if God wants to do something, witches have to take a seat. But what if the heavens, the angels, I don't know, high holy powers have decided they're going to help somebody and a witch wants to curse them? Can a witch override the angels? Can a witch override the will of astrology and the stars? Where does a witch's power stop? And the Talmud makes a claim. The Talmud says, why is sorcery? Rabbi Yechanan says, why is sorcery called kishafim? That's the Hebrew word for it. Because it contradicts the heavenly entourage. That is an acronym that works in Hebrew and does not work in English. Trust me, the two words end up mushing together nicely. Rabbi Hanina disagrees. Rabbi Hanina says, sorcery is ineffective against a righteous person. And then Rabbi Hanina is not just going to say it, Rabbi Hanina's got to prove it, and we are back into story mode. Rabbi Hanina doesn't just talk the talk, he literally walks the walk. He says, recently, a little while ago, was walking down the street, and a lady was walking behind me, and she kept on leaning underneath my feet and grabbing dust from under my feet and putting it in a pocket. And he said, what are you doing? And she goes, I'm a witch. This is how I do witch stuff. She was going to curse him. I don't know this kind of witchcraft. I don't know the witchcraft where you collect dust from someone's feet and curse them, but apparently it was once a very popular kind of witchcraft. So he looks under his foot, and he sees this lady's nose, and I've got to tell you, if there's a witch under my foot trying to collect my dust to curse me, I'm not going to be as generous as Rabbi Hanina. She's getting the foot, right? But that's not... I don't think I'm a bad guy for kicking a witch in the nose. You seem to be judging me. You weren't there. So Rabbi Hanina doesn't kick her in the nose. He lifts his foot, looks under, and he goes, give it your best shot. Go for it. Go for it. If you think you can do something with my feet dirt, go for it. Make my day, says Rabbi Hanina. He says back, if you think you can succeed, go ahead and do it. Doesn't it say in the Torah, Ein od milvado, that there's nothing in the world but God? I'm quite confident my God is stronger than your dust. So Rabbi Hanina discusses witches, apparently met a witch, talked back to a witch, used God to defeat a witch, and he does it as a story, but the story has a context. The story appears in the Talmud as part of a legal discussion. What can a witch do and what can't she do? Do we have to worry about witches? Do I have to worry about a witch if I'm doing my Jewish thing right? Do I have to worry more broadly about the world harming me if I'm doing the right thing? And comes in the Talmud and says, God runs the entire world, and you know what? Here's a proof. Fought a witch one time. This is how these wild stories end up in the Talmud. They're not placed in randomly. They're part of a discussion. And it's all over the place. For each of these that I'm showing you, this is one slide from a literal 10, 20 slide presentation on the topic. There are tons of stories about all of these subjects. And every single one of them tells the same truth. The Talmud knows what it's talking about, has a message for us. The Talmud contains everything a Jew could possibly be interested in and more. The Talmud contains the wisdom of all times and all places. And therefore, You have doors, and you can give people doors and they can walk through them. And someone who loves a kid who's real into Harry Potter, does that still happen that kids are into that? But I don't know. Yeah, okay, a kid who's real into Harry Potter, you can show them this piece of Talmud, that's their door. They'll walk right through to the rest of it. I've seen this personally. This I have seen personally. I've had parents call me and say, from the middle school class where I taught this to 7th and 8th graders, say their kid never opened a Talmud until they heard one of these classes. They wanted to find it. It's not just kids, it's grown-ups. It's only kids who admit it. Let me tell you something. If you're not writing down the folios you can find these on, you're missing out on the best part of the lecture. Because wherever you find that folio, there's more beneath it. I'm not telling you. And demons are everywhere. They are so into demons in the Talmud. Demons are a very, very big deal. The Talmud takes demons very seriously. These other ones, I'm not sure how literally to take witches. I told you there's an argument among the commentaries whether witches can really do anything. I told you that the dragon is a term used by Isaiah to describe something, but not necessarily real. Demons, I gotta tell you, the Talmud believes in demons. The Talmud cautions you not to walk certain places at certain times because of demons. Fun fact that no rabbi really wants me to tell you, do you know why we're so careful not to do dangerous things during the 3 weeks and the 9 days leading up to Tisha B'Av? You know, you say demons and you kind of guess demons. Let me just double down for a moment. That's not a Kabbalistic idea. The Code of Jewish Law, which is a legal text that contains no overt Kabbalah, says we are careful during the 3 weeks because a murder demon is around during that period of time. It's not even a commentary. It's in the Code of Jewish Law. So yeah, we take demons pretty seriously. If you don't like that, I can't help you. I can't fight something taken this seriously by the Talmud. They have demons, and there are sections. This section in Talmud and Brachos 6a is like 2 pages of nothing but demonology. And it is terrifying. I will say that when I taught this one to the middle school, my demon class was banned forever because literally, the parents called up and said their children were unable to sleep. 2 parents called and said the kids were having nightmares. The demon class was banned from the curriculum. So I'm no longer allowed to teach demons because I guess I make them too scary, but I'm just reading the Talmud. So you know, if you love horror, where do you think the genre of horror began? I'm telling you, it's all in there. That's what's cool about this stuff. If the eye were granted permission to see them, the Talmud says, no creature would be able to withstand the demons. Abaye says they are more numerous than us, and they stand like a ridge surrounding a field. They're everywhere and they're constantly surrounding you. They're in the room right now. You see why this got banned. Rav Huna says, each and every one of us has 1,000 on his left hand and 10,000 on his right hand. Look to your left, look to your right. Demons! Rava says, the crowding at a public lecture. You feeling a little claustrophobic in this room? Feel like maybe there are too many people in the room? Feel like you wish you could spread out a little more? The crowding in a public lecture. It comes from them. The weariness of the knees. Who here feels like their knees are a little bit older than they were last time they stood up? Yeah. The weariness of the knees from them. The rabbi's garments that wear out come from their rubbing against them. Why do I get holes in my sleeves? Because they're rubbing against me. One who wishes to know that demons exist should place fine ashes around his bed, and in the morning the demon's footprints will appear in the ashes like the footprints of a chicken. One of my students did this, and they appeared, and I know his father, and his father's hilarious. And his father went by his bed and she like, amazing, amazing. One who wishes to see them should take the afterbirth of a firstborn black female cat. You can pick one up at that kosher supermarket at the corner. Born to a firstborn black female cat, those you have to pre-order, but Amazon can overnight them. Burn it in fire, grind it, and place it in his eyes. Don't try this at home. I'm giving business to eye doctors. This is a great way to hurt your eyes. Rabbi Bar Abaye did try this. Whew. Saw the demons and was harmed. The sages prayed for mercy on his behalf, and he was healed. But I don't know that prayer, so you are on your own if you try this. I can't help you. Ready for this? Ready? Watch. I don't do slide animations, but I couldn't resist that one. All right. Sometimes it's not just because, he's going to be helping us the whole time. This dragon is going to keep coming back. You know, some people don't like ChatGPT, but I must tell you, for people who make slides, it has been a godsend. They did not have people illustrating confused dragons with glasses doing Torah. This was something that, if it wasn't for, but for the grace of artificial intelligence. Look, he has Shabbos candles. He has a yad. It's a whole thing. So yeah, ChatGPT can do this. Yeah. I said, you know what I told it? I said I want a confused-looking dragon studying a Torah scroll. Honestly, pretty good. So sometimes we study the supernatural in the Torah because it gives us an appreciation for just how complex this text is, just how wonderful our history is, just how incredible our culture is. Sometimes it reminds us that it is an extended story of which we are the next chapter. Sometimes it shows us that God and the Torah are eternal and it's worth investing in because a human could never conceive of any idea that has not already been discussed in our holy Torah, which includes, of course, our oral tradition spanning 3,883 years. But sometimes the Talmud brings these things because we need them in order to understand Jewish law. For example, golems. I don't know if it's a golem. I'll tell you and you decide. The Talmud says, Rava bara gavra. Once upon a time, Rava, the great sage, made a man. Doesn't say a golem. It says he made a person. And since he made something awesome, he did exactly what I would do if I made something awesome. Shadri le Rebbe Zera. He sent it to his buddy Rebbe Zera. Rabbi Brisky, check your mailbox. If I ever make a golem, it's coming to you first. He sent it to his buddy. And this golem robot thing, this person he made, this artificial intelligence, let's call it a robot, because honestly, if a person makes something out of component parts and it can walk and move and look like a person, that sounds like an AI to me. So Rava made an advanced AI that had real good face technology because Shadra the Rebbe Zera, it goes over to Rebbe Zera, and Rebbe Zera starts chatting with it. And Rebbe Zera is fooled and thinks this is a guy. So this is a very convincing AI, better than anything we have. I can tell that I can't tell that images are AI. I'm AI blind, but I can tell if something is written by AI. I sure can. This was convincing. This is better than the tech we have today. Rebbe Zera tries to talk with it, keeps on failing, looks at it and goes, min chavrayat. I see, one of my buddies made you. One of the sages made you. Hada le'afrach. Turn back into dust, go back into your component pieces, and breaks Rava's toy. This is an interesting story about the supernatural. You know what else it is? Let me get my years right. Rabbi Tzvi Ashkenazi is the Chacham Tzvi. He was born in 1658. He read this line of Talmud, this page of Talmud, and I'm sure for 1,600 years leading up to him, nobody knew exactly what to do with this wild story. He read this and said, you know, we still don't know how to do this, but one day, bet you tech will figure it out. That's what he says. Because I bet you one day we'll know how to make people. I bet you some Kabbalist, some magician, some scientist, someone will figure out how to do this. And if they do, the Talmud is telling me something very important. If they ever do figure out how to make a very human-like thing from component parts, ever. An AI, perhaps. He says, if they ever do, we have clearly in our Talmud that you would be allowed to kill it. That it could never be considered alive. Because Rebbe Zera turned it back into its component pieces and didn't get the death penalty. Demonstrating that no matter how intelligent AI gets, it would never be intelligent enough that it would have the status of a human being. So why does the Talmud bring this supernatural wild story? I don't know exactly. I'm sure God has his reasons for letting stuff into his book, but one of them is that we use this practically in halacha, practically in Jewish law, to figure out what AI is, what the limitations of it might be, what we can and cannot do with it. So sometimes the supernatural appears on the scene to tell us how to live our lives as Jews, literally seeding Jewish law for the future. A whole bunch of the strangest things in the Talmud. I think I cited yesterday the classic flying box example. The Talmud has the laws of flying boxes in it. There didn't used to be flying boxes. I might, with God's help, get on one tonight. By seeding our tradition with things that would ultimately mean something, God planned for the future. The Talmud, the Torah, they are not out of date. They're ready. And one of the best examples of that are the supernatural stories that lean in that direction. I got another one of those. Rabbi Chanina and Rabbi Yechiel in Sanhedrin 65b, they used to spend Friday afternoon learning Kabbalah, specifically the Sefer Yetzirah. The reason why that's cool just academically is because this is, as far as I know, the only reference to a Kabbalah book by name in the Talmud. There is generally speaking, Kabbalah was hidden at that point. Generally speaking, we were unaware of the names of Kabbalah books, and many of them, like the Zohar, had not necessarily been written yet. The Zohar comes out in the time of the Mishnah, right around then, by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. But a lot of these books, some of them hadn't been written yet. The ones that had were hidden. The Sefer Yetzirah is very old. We have a tradition the Sefer Yetzirah was written by Adam, like the Adam. Another tradition was written by Abraham, the Abraham. So it's an old book. But the Talmud is not traditionally open about mysticism. And here it says, these two individuals would study Sefer Yetzirah every Friday afternoon. And they knew how to drive it. It's a Kabbalah book, and they used it to make a cow. A yummy cow. Apparently these third-born calves are delicious. I've never tried one, but they're supposed to be the fattiest and the most delicious. Gentlemen in the room, how do you help for Shabbos? Right, Rabbi Chanina, if you are not manufacturing a fatty cow for your wives, you are not doing your job as a Jewish man. This is what Jewish men did. Oh, you did the dishes. Big deal. They made a cow. Rabbi Chanina and Rabbi Yechiel made a cow, and they ate it for Shabbos. You know what it doesn't say they did in the Talmud? Slaughtered it, salted it. It suggests that perhaps if you magically make meat, that you might not have the normal laws of kashrus in play. Aha! You know what some rabbis wrote about, 10 years ago, when they started making lab-grown meat? Perhaps lab-grown meat is automatically parv. Perhaps lab-grown meat can come from a non-kosher animal. Perhaps there are no rules for lab-grown meat because it doesn't come into the world naturally, it comes into the world magically. Now, I must tell you, this was not the conclusion of any of the rabbis. Because there's a big weight of evidence on the other side. Let me just run this by you. Does this seem like lab-grown meat to you? It's not. It's magic. It's a sefer yitzira. It's a cow. It doesn't come from anything. Comes from. This is not a good case. It really isn't a good analog. But it was floated in the responsa. It was written up as a possibility and then pretty soundly rejected. What the rabbis ended up absorbing is the other principle found in Tractate Bechoros that's a lot more comprehensive, which states that anything, if you want to know its status in Jewish law as far as kashrus goes, you have only one question to ask: what did it come from? If it comes from something pure, it's pure. Impure, impure. Meat, meat. Dairy, dairy. So, the actual status of lab-grown meat, according to most rabbis, is, they're still working on it, honestly, but the OU released a statement that in their opinion, lab-grown meat is something that must come from a kosher slaughtered and processed animal and has the status of meat. But, had it not been for this story in the Talmud, we wouldn't have the responses that led up to it. So sometimes the most miraculous stories in the Talmud end up being real active areas of rabbinic research thousands of years later. Supernatural, sure. It's conjuring. But halachic. And a person really can't, some people think, I don't know how they got this idea because rabbis don't function this way, but some people think that the legal parts of the Talmud are for rabbis and the legend parts of the Talmud are for the simple folk, the common folk, the people who are interested in reading but not in ruling in Jewish law. People who think that have never read Jewish law. The majority of Jewish law, the responses that have been coming out on practical issues throughout the ages, they cite the legends of the Talmud again and again and again as support for their arguments. Without the entire Talmud, you can't rule on law because God hid a lot of the stuff we'd need for the future in stories that sounded ridiculous 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, and right now we need them desperately. So sometimes the legends appear to give us guideposts. There he is again! He's back! And sometimes they're there not to give us guideposts, or maybe they do that too, and not necessarily to show us that everything's in the Torah, although they probably do that too, but to give us a moral message, to teach us something. That is, the supernatural is cited. It might be real, it might not. We'll talk about that later. But it tells us something that we might not have been able to learn if God hadn't let the monsters sneak into the text. Like mermaids. You guys remember our discussion about mermaids yesterday? I'm not going to do that one today, but I will remind you, yesterday we had a discussion over whether mermaids would be kosher. I guess I can't not tell you the answer because I teased it yesterday. Yeah, I know. Welcome to the Jewish people. We have a cool monster. Our first question is, can I eat it? Gefilte mermaid. This is the most Jewish thing in the world. The most Jewish thing in the world, gefilte mermaid. I told you that the Aruch HaShulchan, who has the best name in Jewish history, Yechiel Michael Epstein, my man. My name's Yechiel, for those of you who don't remember. And there aren't a lot of us, me and the Aruch HaShulchan and like two others. He has a long discussion about whether or not you can eat a mermaid, and obviously the factor in favor is that they have fins and scales. However, what the rabbis haven't told you, the big secret is, and I don't usually do trick questions. This one's a trick question. Prepare yourself. Don't answer if you don't want to sound silly. Why can't you eat a lobster according to Jewish law? If you're going to say because it doesn't have fins and scales, that's right, you're not going to be right. It's a different reason.
Sheretz.
That's ooh, nice. Nobody ever gets that one. The rule is, the actual rule of kosher things in the sea are, something that has the shape of a fish must have fins and scales. Something that doesn't have the shape of a fish, no matter what it has, is non-kosher. Meaning, a lobster with fins and scales is still non-kosher because it's not shaped like a fish. It's called a sheretz, a bug of the ocean. The Aruch HaShulchan concludes that your daughter's favorite thing, mermaids, are, halachically, bugs. They're shaped like ladies, not like fish, and therefore, even if they have fins and scales, they are not kosher. And he concludes his text by tragically telling us we may not eat the mermaids. That's not why I brought this. It's just fun discussion. I brought this instead to show you mermaids in the Talmud. So we have in Tractate Bechoros, not to be confused with Brachos. This is Bechoros. Bechoros 8a. The Talmud says that there's a group of things in the ocean called dolphanim, and they reproduce like people. Now, I got to tell you, this is a very innocent piece of Talmud. I know what a dolphin is. A dolphin is a Dolphin pronounced like you live in Borough Park. A dolphin. It's a dolphin. It's a dolphin. So it's a dolphin. It's dolphinim. And they reproduce like people. Yeah, they do. They're mammals. That was surprising to the ancient world. They look like fish. They reproduce like mammals. They have mammaries. That is an interesting piece of zoology. And then Rashi comes in and makes things interesting. Rashi once again. I will read and translate. Dagim yesh bayam. There's fish in the sea. Wow, we're setting the world on fire. No, don't worry. He keeps going. There are fish in the sea. Shechetzian turas adam. Half of them have the shape of a person. V'chetzian, and the other half, turas dag, is shaped like a fish. Uvalaz sirena. And in our language we call them the sirens. Rashi says these are mermaids, and fun fact, mermaids reproduce like people. What is the age of the youngest person in the room? I'm deciding whether to tell you what Tosfos says. We'll get away with it. Tosfos says, we'll get away with it. I don't know if I'll be invited back, but we'll get away with it. Tosfos says that this is an incorrect version of the Talmud, that a letter has been misplaced, and that in fact this says they reproduce from people, and that's where you get baby mermaids from. Fun fact in Tosfos, look it up there. Okay. The Chidah in Midbar Kedemus elaborates upon the mermaids, and they are not your friends. Mermaids are not your friends. They're not nice. It says there's a fish in the sea called Sirenia. I know what that is. From the waist up, it has the form of a lady. From the waist down, the form of a fish. It beats the alternative. Its dwelling place is among rocks and scary, right? Its dwelling place is among rocks and dangerous parts of the sea. I will say that when people ask me, is the Bermuda Triangle anywhere in the Torah, I do like to cite this source here that says that there are murder mermaids at the dangerous parts of the sea. I'm not telling you cruise lines disappear because of hungry mermaids, but I'm not telling you that they don't. So, its dwelling place is among rocks and the dangerous parts of the sea. Whenever a ship passes by, it begins to sing and chant with a very pleasant voice, to the point that it casts a spell of sleep over all the people on the ship. The cure to insomnia, the mermaid. And then it enters the ship and kills everyone on board and eats them. Puts kind of a shadow over the Little Mermaid, doesn't it? I have turned mermaids into bugs that eat people. And possibly reproduce with them. I've ruined mermaids. I've ruined mermaids. And you know what? This is not the Tzemach Tzedek. This is the Tzemach Tzedek. Completely different person. They should have had a discussion. The names are very similar. But this is the Tzemach Tzedek. Different commentary. Chapter 17. He says, we learn a lot from mermaids. You know what we learn from mermaids that sing people to their death, sing them to sleep, and then eat them alive? There's some people in the world who flatter. And I don't mean flattering like, hey, Rabbi, nice suit. You're right. I mean somebody who does the sin of flattery. The sin of flattery is defined in the Talmud, first of all, as the reason why God destroyed the temple. So it's a big deal. The Talmud in Tractate Sota says that God decided to destroy the temple the day that some Jews told an illegitimate king who did not belong on the throne, who was also very nice to them, you are our brother, we love you, stay in power. That's nice words. Why do we get in trouble for saying a nice thing? Because if we say something that encourages somebody to continue sinning, that itself is a sin. That doesn't mean we can't be nice to people who aren't doing the right thing right now. We're supposed to be nice to everybody, show everybody love. It means don't encourage bad behavior. Encouraging bad behavior is what the Torah calls flattery, and it is an incredibly serious crime. Says the Tzemach Tzedek, flatterers are like mermaids. What does a mermaid do? It's a fish in the ocean. You've heard this before. It dwells in rocky outcroppings. You heard this before. Plays instruments. They fall asleep. It devours them. So too, Shlomo Melech said, King Solomon, with his mouth, the flatterer destroys his neighbor. They say, you know what? It's okay that you're violating Jewish law. You know what? It's okay that you're doing something you shouldn't be doing. You know what? My form of love is not just accepting you, it's accepting what you're doing right now. And it seems so sweet, and it's a nice song, and it lulls the person doing the sin to sleep so they never even think about repenting. And then they end up devoured by their worst qualities. A friend is not a mermaid. What a friend does is a friend loves the person and is not afraid to at least not support, and if you're close enough, even slightly encourage people not to be involved in bad behavior. People, when they misplace their love and decide to use their love to encourage somebody to take themselves down a destructive path, they're not helping anybody. They're murder mermaids. And that's the Tzemach Tzedek. So sometimes the supernatural gives us a sobering moral message. Don't worry, we're back to having fun. There are rainbow unicorns. Are you ready? In Shemos, in the Torah this time, we have a tabernacle. What's a tabernacle? A mishkan. What's a mishkan? A tabernacle. Some translations are worthless. This is almost as bad as phylacteries. I don't know what a tabernacle is. I don't know what a phylactery is. But excuse me, sir, you're Jewish. You want to put on phylacteries. Maybe later on we can go to the tabernacle. Some words translate so poorly that they don't mean anything. But the tabernacle, whatever it was a traveling temple that we had in the desert. And one of the ways we built it was using cedar wood and a couple skins that went on top. Let's read. It says there, the tabernacle needs to be made with red dyed skins of rams, which sounds very attractive, and skins of the tachash, don't know what that is, and cedar wood. I better find out what the tachash is. Can't make a tabernacle without some tachash. What skin of tachash am I putting on? You can see where this is going. What skin of tachash am I putting on my tabernacle? And in Tractate Shabbos 28a, the tachash is explored. The tachash, the Talmud says, existed in the days of Moses. It was a creature unto itself. The sages were undecided whether it was a species of wild animal or a species of domesticated animal. I can't tell you if it's more like a lion or more like a cow. All I can tell you is it had a single horn on its forehead and it was kosher. The way we know it was kosher is animals with single horns on their forehead would, according to the Talmud, automatically be kosher. Ask me more about it later. And it appeared to Moses only temporarily. From it he made the tabernacle, and then it was concealed. It existed for just a short period of time in the desert, hopped onto the scene to be used for its skin to make the tabernacle, and I guess if you want, we hunted it to extinction. That's not what happened. God made it appear and then made it disappear. So it existed only for the purposes of the temple. In Aramaic, it's called the sasgona. Sas means rejoice. Gavna means colors because it rejoices in its rainbow colors. It's a beautiful pelt, a beautiful coat. Look at that beautiful unicorn. You know why that's not accurate? What did the Talmud not say it looks like? A horse. You know what the Talmud did say it looks like? A kosher animal with a horn. So I hate to do this to you, I really do. But as far as in my humble opinion, when I think kosher animal, I think cow. So yeah, that's what it probably was. Probably a counicorn. That's not how the Latin would work. Counicorn is whatever. A counicorn, probably. What can we learn from my dear anything? If your daughter liked something, I just ruined it. We did mermaids. We did unicorns. The girls do not appreciate these classes. They tell them to their sisters, though. I tell you that. The Rebbe has a talk about unicorns. A sikha about unicorns. And in Teres Menachem, from the year that he talked, that particular year, 1992, there were a lot of Mashiach-style talks, even more than usual. The Rebbe always talks about Mashiach, but especially that year. Volume 1, page 148. The Rebbe says that the reason why Mashiach has not come yet is because we have fulfilled part of our task, but not all of it. We have acted like gold, but not like unicorns. And he says this. Before the tabernacle and after the tabernacle, gold existed. Gold has many purposes. I've been told you can use it to buy stuff. However, Jews don't use it for that. Jews use it for charity and good things and for strengthening their family and for taking care of others. We use gold for the right reasons. It's true gold can be misused according to the rumors. But gold is been dedicated in the tabernacle to God. In the tabernacle, the gold's for God. So gold represents taking something in this world that can be used for optional things, can be used for, God forbid, forbidden things, and channeling it toward the tabernacle. That's beautiful, says the Rebbe. We did that already. We've done that. We've accomplished that goal. However, there's a different kind of thing in the tabernacle called the unicorn, the tachash. The tachash appeared only for the purposes of the tabernacle. It disappeared when the tabernacle was done being constructed. It was not something that existed before and after and has alternate uses. It is 100% dedicated to the mission. Says the Rebbe, when the Jewish people decide that they're not part-time Jews who are sometimes gold for the tabernacle and sometimes gold to buy stuff, but full-time Jews who are unicorns every single day. When you live like a unicorn, Mashiach comes. We got to live like unicorns. Which brings me to Bigfoot. This is my last monster. I might cut into our Q&A, but I think it's worth it for the creatures. So, if the Q&A if we don't have time for the Q&A, you can email me questions. I don't want to cut out creatures in the hopes of giving Q&A. By the way, what questions could you possibly have? Seriously, I don't think I've stimulated thought as much as I have shown you cool monsters. We have Bigfoot, kind of. I don't know if it's Bigfoot. You decide. There's a Mishnah in Kilayim. You would never expect where this is about to go. There's a law in the Torah that says you're not allowed to take two animals and have them plow a field together because they interact poorly with each other. So you can't have a cow and a horse or a moose and a pig plowing a field together. It just doesn't work. They don't work well together. You can have a human and a cow pull a plow together because humans are not animals, but any two animals cannot plow together if they're not the same kind of animal. Because of that, the Mishnah in Kilayim goes through a list of animals and identifies what they are and what species they are so you can figure out how to do your plowing. And very practical, very important for our daily lives, right? And when somebody plows, you need these Mishnayos. And along the way, the Mishnah says, the Adnei Hasadeh are considered a chaya, a kind of wild animal, not a person. Rabbi Yechiel says, but their corpses impart impurity in a tent like a person. So when they die, we treat their bodies like a person, but they're not people, they're animals. You know what the Mishnah forgot to tell us, right? What are the Adnei Hasadeh? When you're stuck in the Babylonian Talmud, you open the Jerusalem Talmud, a Talmud that was written around the same time and sometimes elaborates where other ones go short. If you do the two together, you get the full story. The Jerusalem Talmud, in Kilayim in that same section, defines the Adnei Asada. These are the men of the mountains who live by their stomachs. What? If their stomachs become detached, they cannot live. I don't know what that means. But I do have commentary. I have Rav Evadi Mebar Tanura, the commentary on the Mishnah, who explains the tradition in full, and I would like to read it to you because it didn't fit on the slide. Ready? He lived in 1445 and he writes, "They are animals that grow from the land. A sort of large vine emerges from the land, and this animal grows from it like a pumpkin, and its stomach remains attached to this vine which emerges from the land. It has the shape, face, hands, and feet of a person, but no creature can come near it because it will murder and tear anything apart in its vicinity. When you want to hunt it, you shoot arrows at the vine until it becomes detached. It then lets out a bitter cry, very detailed, and dies." I'm sorry, yeah. So that is a AI once again. Good job. First of all, just what? And second of all, first of all, what? That's first of all. Second of all, don't go hiking without a bow and arrow. This is safety first. I'm here to make sure everybody goes home safe. If you do not have a bow and arrow, Rabbi Brisky will have a bow and arrow prepared for you after the lecture. Don't go into the Agora Hills if you're unarmed. I mean, these things, I don't know where they are, but they're around. They're around. Here's the other thing, though. The Rebbe gives a talk about them. AI is very helpful. And the Rebbe, Likutei Sechos, volume 24, page 116, says, we're a lot like trees. And there's even some animals that are sort of like trees, that are sort of like us in turn. And maybe we can learn a thing or two from the Adnei Asada. And the Rebbe looks at the Adnei Asada and says, this thing is fearsome. It destroys anything that comes near it. It conquers the world. It conquers anything. Nothing can stand up to the Adnei Asada. These are powerful creatures that can change the world around them. But if they become detached from their source, they are worthless. They end up just being a dead piece of vegetation. And the Rebbe says, a Jew is empowered with the ability to go out into the world and flip it to good, to completely change their local environment, their larger environment, the world itself, to bring Mashiach and bring redemption to a world that the world cannot imagine right now. The Jewish people have incredible power when they remain attached to their source in Torah and mitzvahs, and when they never forget their Jewish education. But a Jew who says, you know what, I'm doing pretty great out here. I really think I'm succeeding. I'm just doing fantastic in business. I'm doing fantastic in life. Things are just going great. I think I'll detach myself from the ground for a moment and see how it goes. What happens when the Adnei Asada, this fearsome monster, becomes detached from its source? It's a pumpkin. And the Rebbe says, our secret power is not that we can tear things apart and flip the world over and change the status quo. Our secret power is the vine that connects us to our source. So sometimes the creatures of the Talmud appear to remind us of who we really are and make sure we never forget. Now, I've told you some pretty wild things, a lot of really wild things. You might remember me from yesterday as the one who does not do wild things. I literally gave a 5-hour lecture on rationalism. I'm hoping to catch a red-eye flight back to go work in a science lab. I am deeply unqualified for these sorts of things, given that I just told you about mermaids and unicorns for an hour. I mean, you really have to wonder about my scientific acumen after this. And so I'd like to defend myself with the final moments that we have before the end of this lecture with a discussion between a very famous scientist, an astrobiologist who worked for NASA. By the way, awesome job. Astrobiology. That's right. He studied life in space, or at least how it would be supported in space, for NASA. That's what he looked like. That's Velvel Green. He worked for NASA. And he used to talk to the Rebbe sometimes. And one time he asked the Rebbe, is it okay for me to look for aliens, or is that too fantastical, too wild, too mythical for a rational scientific person, or perhaps too out there for a Jew who should be focused on higher pursuits? Does a rabbi care about aliens? Does a scientist care about aliens? That's essentially what he was asking. Is this for Jews? Is this for scientists? Is this for rational thinking people, or people who are focused on Torah and mitzvahs? And the Rebbe said back, you should look for life on Mars. You should keep looking, and if you don't find it, keep looking elsewhere and keep looking. Because to sit here in this world and say there's no life elsewhere is to put a limit around what God can do. And that, nobody can do. Scientists are trained to be cautious and incredulous, but we're trained not to lose our sense of wonder. And Jews are trained to be cautioned and credulous, but never lose our sense of wonder. Dismissing something wild simply because it's wild takes all the joy out of life. But you know what else it does? It betrays what a scientist is, and it betrays what a Jew is. A Jew is wide-eyed and in wonder. A Jew has no limit in their mind about what God can do, and by the way, neither does a legitimate scientist. God can do anything, I must tell you. Mermaids, not terribly likely, right? How many of us believe in mermaids? I don't necessarily believe in mermaids. I'll tell you this though. You know how much of the ocean we've explored according to Noah? N-O-A-A, Noah? We've explored less than 5% of the ocean. 95% we haven't seen. I must tell you, as a scientist, if you told me that you read 5% of a book and you're sure there's no mermaids in it, I would tell you maybe check the other 95% before drawing conclusions. If you haven't seen 95% of something, you've seen none of it. The world is fascinating and large and enormous and interesting. And a scientist is wide-eyed and interested in it, and a Jew even more so. We never lose our sense of wonder. Sometimes as adults we lose it. The Talmud brings it back. Some of what the Talmud does is remind you God can do anything, and that the most wild things might be out there. I mean, the rabbis seem to have seen them. Why not me? Why not me? So no, I can't tell you I take every story in the Talmud seriously. Some of them are very clearly written as allegories. Some of them the rabbis have taught us that they were meant to be allegories from the beginning. But I'm saying to lose your sense of wonder is a horrible thing to lose. And something that the Talmud does is it keeps your wonder exactly where it belongs. It keeps a scientist scientific, and it keeps a Jew believing. He's back for a final slide. There's a couple reasons to study the supernatural, at least a couple ones that I've found. One reason to delve into these things is because you're opening doors for yourself and opening doors for others. The initial discussion that we had, the aliens discussion. Sometimes we engage in the supernatural because if something is out there in the world, I guarantee you the eternal Torah, the written word, and the oral message sent down from Sinai from God Almighty, I promise you, there's nothing in this world that isn't in there somewhere. Hafachba v'fachba dekulaba. Dig into it, flip it over, and you will find everything in the Talmud. Sometimes we study these stories just to affirm our faith, to remind ourselves that there has never been a book like this in history because there's never been a book that God took personal interest in making sure it turned out the way He wanted. God's the editor of the Talmud, and in many ways the writer of the Talmud. And let me tell you something. There's a reason why it's eternal and always applies and has everything in it. We cheated. God stacked the deck and put His thumb on the scale. The Talmud is a holy book, and everything's in it. That's one reason to study the supernatural and to find this in the pages, to remind yourself what is incredible about the oral Torah and get excited about Torah study. Another reason is to learn Jewish law. You can't rule in Jewish law without a good grounding in the legends of the Talmud. You won't understand a lot of very brainy rabbinic responsa without knowing how a lot of these wild stories work. The legends of the Talmud end up being the basis for law, and once again reaffirm our faith that when God gives us something, it's not a silly story. If it doesn't make sense now, it'll be needed for something at some point in history. God stacked the Talmud with everything we would need in order to survive the next 2,000 years, all the way until Mashiach, who should come before the end of this very lecture, and He put it there in the Talmud. Sometimes the legends are there to remind us that halacha is complex, based on legend sometimes, but always based on truth. And if you don't know it, you can't be the next chapter and can't write the next part of the story. And sometimes the legends of the Talmud are there to teach us a moral lesson that we wouldn't necessarily have a good metaphor for otherwise. Sometimes we need reminders that we shouldn't be like mermaids, even though it's tempting to say nice things all the time. Sometimes telling a friend a hard truth is the kindest thing that you can do. Sometimes we're getting very successful and the world is going in our favor and everything's coming up us, and we need a reminder that as long as we remain attached to the ground, we'll continue to succeed. And the moment that we forget what gives us our success, our power, is God in the Torah, that horrible things could happen, God forbid. Sometimes the legends of the Talmud are a wake-up call, where you stare at it, you read about a wild monster, and you think for a moment, and you realize that this wild monster could make you a lot better. This is a very brief tour. There's much, much more in the Talmud than what I've shown you. If there's one thing you take away from this lecture, I hope that it will be that I saw on your website that you guys teach Talmud here. Even if you didn't have an official Talmud class, any of the rabbis here would be very happy to learn Talmud with you. This is something we are all very passionate about. If you do not learn Talmud already, if you don't learn Jewish oral tradition already, you're missing out on the best stuff. That's the message I really want to give you. Even more than the morality and the halacha and the knowing God. I must tell you, it's where the fun is. They didn't teach you this in Hebrew school, did they? They didn't teach you this in yeshiva, did they? I can't blame them. They had to focus on the most important things that a Jew needs to survive. But let me tell you something. This is where the fun is. This is where the excitement is. This is where your face turns red and you get a little bit sweaty and you can't stop reading and you find yourself in the middle of the night still poring over an ancient text that was written 2,000 years ago that links you back to your people. If nothing else from this, I hope I've given you a little bit of the passion, a little bit of the joy you can get from the Talmud. I think a lot of that's found in the legends of the Talmud. Thank you all very much.